Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. I'm just going to hopefully introduce things a little bit and explain a little bit more about the reasons that we're here. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Malie Coyne. Dr. Malie Coyne's the main event. She's going to be doing the vast bulk of this evening. Without further ado, I'm going to take you through this very quickly. So this is really the background. We did a very similar version of this webinar back in November. You can see there called Supporting Your Teen When They're Feeling Socially Excluded. And Malie did a fantastic job that night. You can see there it was back on the 10th of November. And there was a lot of questions that came in and comments and kind of requests from parents that had teens that were a bit more neurodivergent. So that was really why we said we put this on and do a follow-up that was more aimed at parents that had teens, neurodivergent teens that were experiencing this whole area of social exclusion. So we're going to be covering that in a bit more depth and a bit more detail. It was put on as part of the Western Region Drug and Alcohol Task Force's Awareness Week, which is usually the 2nd of November every year. So we did a whole bunch of different stuff that week. But part of it was put under the Planet Youth Programme and banner, which is a project I'm heavily involved in. You can see there it's an interagency project led by the task force, but it's a public health programme that we're operating here based on the Icelandic prevention model. Most of the resources I'm going to show you, and including the recording of this webinar, will be put up on the west.planetyouth.ie website in the coming days. And if you see there in the resources on the top there, if you go to the west.planetyouth.ie website, you'll find under resources, videos and parent booklets and different things like that. So we're backed by the big statutory organizations in the region. This is why we do it. Dramatic change and, kind of consistent and steady kind of change, if you like, in substance use rates with Icelandic teenagers. So very, very impressive public health program that was set about to try and reduce very high levels of substance use rates in their teenage population, and very effectively did so and changed a lot of other very important things along the way. Like early school leaving and bullying and juvenile crime. And we're using their approach here to address some concerns that we see in our data. So it's a big program that operates in Galway, Mayo, Roscommon and other parts of the country now. And every 2 years, what we do is we survey all of our young people in all of our schools at 15 and 16 with a very comprehensive and detailed lifestyle survey called the Planet Youth Questionnaire. Takes them about 40 minutes to fill it in, and it asks them about their life in school, their life at home, their life with friends, life online, their substance use, hobbies, sports, mental health, sexual health. It's all asked in quite a lot of detail and in what's used for validated scale. So we have a very good and accurate picture of what's going on. You can see paper-based at the outset. It's done online now. And what we're always trying to find out is what are the risk and protective factors in the lives of our teenagers. So the teenagers that sit the survey are this age, 15, 16, but the survey is very much more preventative undertaking. So how do we use this information to improve the situation for the kids coming behind and the kids coming behind them? So we do a big program at National School, junior infants and incoming first year. And lots of information online. Those are kind of very detailed area reports and county reports. And you can see here, I'm not going to spend time about this, but school experience or substance use, peer group behavior, leisure time, screen use. It's all talked about. Wellbeing indicators, which would be a little bit about what we're talking about here tonight. Sexual health, differences between boys and girls, have to say, and then cross tabulations, etc. There's recommendations. There's planning interventions for schools, for parents, that kind of thing. It's all there, and we have very good local area data and trends, so we can begin to see in a very detailed way what's going on from place to place. You can see here there's Mayo, there's Galway, there's Castlebar, there's Salthill there. You can see there's Lough Key. So these are for Roscommon, for Mayo, for Galway, Galway City. You can see here the trends for substance use behavior, so cannabis, alcohol, sleep. We can see big significant issues around sleep and screen time, mental health, and so on. And we do a lot of then information that's in support of our parents and schools. You can see this is a school transition website from 6th class into first year. Gets a lot of use before and during every summer. A very big time in a child's life is that move between national school and secondary school. We do kind of detailed feedback for schools and some teaching websites. This one called The Facts, and talks about this for use in SPHE and junior cycle. And then we do a lot of information for parents. So we can see here parent booklets for incoming first year parents and incoming junior for parents. There's a new one about to be analysed for preschool as well. And this is what the office looks like typically from September through to November. So we do an awful lot of work in getting information out to parents. Won't dwell on this, but this is the first year parent booklet. We're extremely good here, by the way, in Ireland in terms of things like parenting and family time and communication at home. So we're excellent there. Delighted to be able to say that. We're always encouraging our parents to keep our kids going in hobbies and sports. It's a big part of the Icelandic model was this big extracurricular drive and getting kids busy doing stuff. Talk a bit about our substance use. Our big problem there is alcohol, vaping to a degree, some concerns about a few other things, but alcohol's always been the big one. Our kids get drunk a lot. There's a lot of parental tolerance for it, a lot of parental alcohol supply. So we talk a little bit about that. Screen time and bed times. Our biggest preventable health problem is actually lack of sleep. And you can see there on that slide, it shows the relationship between sleep and your physical health, your mental health, and engagement at school or school engagement scale. It's very dramatic, and we have well over half of our young people not sleeping enough. So it's a big problem there. And because of that, we had a webinar on the topic of sleep during the Awareness Week back in November, and there'll be a follow-up one actually towards the end of February. You can see the 26th of February. And Lucy Wolf will come back and we'll be looking again at this whole area, neurodivergence and sleep. So if that just might be something of interest to you. So this is why we put on the social exclusion webinar back in November, the general one, right? Because the kids are asked about bullying, they're asked about cyberbullying, they're asked about violence as well. But one of the questions that they're asked in this string of adverse life experience questions is, have you ever been rejected by your friends? And it's extremely high. So we've low rates of regular bullying. It's 3 to 4%. Unfortunately, it's 3 to 4%, but it's not, they're not extremely high. But we say 38% of our kids said yes to that question. Have you ever been rejected by your friends? So that is very high. And you could see when you start to correlate those kids for their mental health, they're very dramatically different. So this is a slide that shows the relationship between, say, mental health, self-reported mental health, and being rejected by your friend group. As I say, it was 38% of all the kids said yes. So this is based on 5,000 kids who sat the survey, this detailed survey in the west of Ireland. And you can see there in the red is around roughly 3,000 of the five that said they hadn't been rejected by their friends. And that's them for poor mental health, for self-harm, and for help-seeking behavior for mental health. But the kids who said they had been rejected by their friends, which is nearly 2,000 of the 5,000, you can see they are quite substantially different for things like self-harm, and then this idea of, well, have you ever sought help and gone out and looked for help for mental health? But this is a more kind of deep, sort of accurate or validated scale. It's called the depression, anxiety, stress scale. So kids with a severe score on that scale is 16% of kids who'd be rejected by their friend group, but it's only 4 if that hadn't been the case. You can see a very dramatic difference there. WHO 5 gives an indication of mental well-being. And again, these are kids who failed the WHO 5. Resilience is a low score on what's called the brief resilience scale or the Rosenberg self-esteem scale. These are again kids with a low self-esteem score. And the difference is a huge between the kids who say they've been rejected by their friends and those who haven't been rejected by their friends. So very, very impactful, seems to be very dramatic effect on mental health, self-esteem, and a lot of other areas of our young people's lives. So hence the reason for November's webinar and this then follow-up that Malie's kindly agreed to come and do, right? I'm very grateful for that. Just finally on that topic, this is a relationship then between peer rejection and substance use, which we're always concerned about here in the task forces, where how are our kids getting on for substance use? But there is definitely something in the data that's showing a difference there too. So you can see lifetime cannabis use, our daily vapors, and then our concern around alcohol is this drunkenness, more recent or regular drunkenness is different as well. Okay, just finally, I'm nearly enough for me now. I've done a lot of talking, but I know I'll tell you at the end what we're going to do with these slides. But this is a question that was introduced into the most recent of these 4 biennial surveys that have happened. So it's a very simple but indicative question around neurodiversity, neurodivergence. It could possibly be better, and we'll look at it for the 2026 survey. But these are the questions that were asked of them, right? For the first time, right? Have you ever been diagnosed with any of the following? So dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. You can put yes or no to any of these. So you can put yes to more than one, or no for that matter, or you can leave them blank. But they were offered ADD, ADHD, and again you can put yes, no, or nothing, right? And then autism was put there, ASD, and then the final option in this kind of string of 4 was I'm waiting for an assessment for one of these, right? And again you could put yes, no, or leave it blank. And this is the way those questions were answered. So this is again of the 5,079 15 to 16-year-olds, the valid response is 13% said they had a dyslexia, dyscalculia, or dyspraxia diagnosis. Yes, they clicked yes. Right, ADD or ADHD was 6% of the kids. Autism ASD was just, it says four, it was rounded up, so it's a little bit less than four. And then there was another, just over 10% of the young people said that they were waiting on an assessment. So if you add all that up, okay, that's what, 10 and 10, and that's 33% of kids said yes to something, right? But it's not really the case that all, there's just a third of our kids are saying yes to, to this, because you could, as a member, if you said they could say yes to more than one. So you could say you have dyslexia and ADD. So you might be able to say yes to more than one. But when you actually, thinned it out or look at the data and say, well, actually, who's put yes down for anything? So you've got a diagnosis or you're waiting for one. It's running at around 25% of the kids that's at the survey. So it's a hell of a lot of kids when you think about it. Okay, and just finally, right, if you correlate in the data these 5,000 kids, do you remember I said 38 or just under 38% of all of our kids say they've been rejected by their friends. They've had that experience. But this is when you correlate for this yes, I'm yes to one of these. So if you said you have dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, it's a little bit different. So they're likely to be just a little bit more likely to say yes, I've been rejected by my friends. With the ADD, ADHD, again, the difference is there. It's a bit more, defined, it's a bit more dramatic maybe. And then autism, ASD, the same. And then the kids who say, I'm waiting for an assessment is kind of the highest of the lot. And that will be the case in a lot of, whatever you care to look at, you'll find that the kids who are waiting for an assessment, who feel there's an issue, or they're down for an assessment, or they're waiting for an assessment, they do seem to have slightly higher or more difficult correlations for stuff. So there's no question that the kids who have some kind of neurodivergent issue or diagnosis are, they have more adversity. It's a bit more of a struggle, no question, for a variety of things. So not just this rejected by your friends, but there's other things too, which we've hoped to follow up on and let you know a bit more about in the future. So that's nearly all I had to say. If you're curious about any of the resources, they're up there on the west.planetyouth.ie website. So listen, I hope you found that useful, and we'll jump in and make a start with the main event, which is Malie. So thanks for coming, Malie.
Thanks so much, Emmett, and thank you to Planet Youth for having me and the Western Regional Drugs and Alcohol Task Force as well. And thank you all for being here tonight as well. Right, so I was here a few months ago, as Emmett said, talking about social exclusion in teenagers, just generally speaking. And a number of questions came up out of that were relating to neurodivergent teens. And I suppose, the reason that I'm here is that I worked in the HSE for 20 odd years, and I've since worked privately, and I've done a lot of work with neurodivergent children, teenagers, families. And, it's become, like I even just by the questions that we have gotten tonight, it shows me that there's a lot of people struggling out there, with wondering what would, because as a parent, because I think that's probably makes me the most qualified to talk really as a parent, is that you don't want anything, you don't want your child to hurt. That's the last thing you want in the world. And so you really want to do the best for them, but you're just trying to figure out what is the best thing, And so hopefully tonight's webinar will help you a little bit with that. It's just kind of it's just the tip of the iceberg that I'm speaking about tonight, because there's actually it's quite a big topic, really. So, I don't need to talk more about myself, but I suppose this builds on the previous webinar on social exclusion. And if you haven't watched that, I would suggest that you do. Because there's a lot of things there that will be relevant to you. We talk about some of those things will be touched on a little bit this evening, but I'm really looking at the same pain with a different lens and what social exclusion looks like for neurodivergent teenagers. And when we organized this, we found that we were getting quite a lot of questions last week. So I was like, okay, well, I'm putting my presentation together. What would be the best way of doing that? So rather than have what was coming into my mind as the bulk of the presentation and then answering all the questions at the end, I've actually decided that the parent questions are going to form the bulk of the presentation. If there's anything I haven't touched on, I will touch on it at the end. And obviously, you're very welcome to ask questions as well. And but hopefully we'll get to them. But hopefully a lot of your questions will be answered because there were common themes across many families, which I must say probably will help you make feel less alone. I think that's one of the things that's really powerful about coming together tonight and realizing how many people are listening is that you're not alone and it is really hard. And difference does not mean deficit. And I mean, since qualifying in the early 2000s, like I remember doing my thesis on ADHD and the way we viewed ADHD back then and autism was so different to how we view neurodivergence now. And I'm also talking about dyslexia and dyscalculia and Tourette's and things like that. We view it very differently. And I think I think we're a lot more neuroaffirmative. But again, that's maybe there's one thing saying using words like neuroaffirmative and difference and all that kind of thing, and it's another thing for all of that to translate into a school playground, into a social kind of setting where I think still a lot of people don't understand the differences that neurodivergent children might present with. And it and might have a misunderstanding about. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Um, so the common themes that came up was school avoidance, which was linked to social overwhelm, social misunderstanding, intent versus impact about, situations that occur, rejection sensitivity, fear of being hurt, confidence knocked by bullying or past exclusion, withdrawal as protection, not lack of interest. Um, include so like lots of parents might have said like, why is my child withdrawing? Should I make them re-engage? What should I do? Inclusion without belonging and safety. That's what I'm talking about. This kind of like lip service that we do, that even a lot of workplaces do to inclusivity. Oh, let's be all inclusive and have an inclusive day. But then when a neurodivergent person lands in the workplace and they might work that little bit differently or then, you've suddenly got issues, so it's I'll be honest with you, I've been diagnosed in the last, well, not, I have been identified as somebody who is neurodivergent in the last year. I haven't actually said that out loud on a presentation before. And it has given me a lot of understanding of, my life and situations, and it's been really helpful. So yeah, I'm not like at the point of like going on social media and talking about it and all of that, but it's definitely something that has helped me to understand myself and helps me and I now kind of go, my God, I did my thesis on ADHD 20 odd years ago and it's just yeah, it's kind of and thanks for the support. Connection and finding safe people was important. Motivation dips after repeated social failure, online spaces as both refuge and risk, the online world, and then parents carrying blame, worry, and uncertainty. So this is a slide from the last presentation, and I just think it's really important because I think we need to know that belonging is a fundamental human need. Without it gives us a sense of safety, connection. I matter, I have a place. It's a buffer against stress and anxiety. It gives you confidence to explore and take risks in your life. It's the foundation for all kind of emotional well-being and resilience. Belonging firstly starts in your family of origin. And then as you get older, your friendships and your peers become more important. So, I think sometimes it can be, people might misunderstand and go, "Oh, well, neurodivergent people have less of a need to belong or less of a need for social connections." That is absolute not true. That is not true. The need for belonging and social connections is absolutely huge, but it just might be expressed in a slightly different way. Um, and belonging gives you the courage to be yourself. It's not a luxury, it is oxygen for the teenage brain, quite literally. So inside the teenage tricky brain, I often just talk about generally the teenage tricky brain, but especially for neurodivergent teenagers, they're going through identity exploration. So like they're going through being possibly neurodivergent, and your child might be identified or not. They might be on a waiting list, but you might suspect. Um, and I guess the identity exploration, who am I? Do I fit in? Where do I belong? That's even more intense for a neurodivergent teenager. Heightened social radar, very aware of peers, social comparison, fear of missing out. This is just normal for a teenager. But this craving belonging whilst being sensitive to signs of exclusion or misunderstanding can be huge. When we've had experiences of feeling not belonging or rejection or exclusion, our social radar is, like our threat focused brain is looking out for those incidences of exclusion in our lives in order to keep us safe. It's not it's not something that you consciously do, but you're just more sensitive to it because it's happened before, and your brain needs to keep you safe in order for you to survive. And you know what I mean? That's evolution. So negativity bias on overdrive. The brain holds on to rejection more than praise. Velcro for the negative, Teflon for the positive, especially after social knockbacks. Emotion take charge in adolescence. Intense feelings, stress and overwhelm feel stronger. Clear thinking and regulation are harder in the moment. Teenagers are not able to they do not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. There's so much development going on for them. Their reasoning is developing. So when you talk about it, I suppose a neurodivergent teenager, you're talking about difficulties in clear thinking, in just general emotional sensory regulation, also on top of everything. And then for a teen, the reward centers are supercharged. Peer approval feels especially powerful. Risk taking or masking can feel worth it to avoid rejection, to avoid rejection. So in other words, if a neurodivergent teen might mask what their issues might be in the social setting that they're in, or they might engage in behaviors that maybe they, in order to fit in. I mean, all teenagers do that to an extent, but maybe more so when you're really trying to fit in, and you might then start vaping or being the troublemaker in class, being the class clown. When I was doing my research on ADHD 20 years ago, that was one of the things. And actually, that's borne out by the statistics in terms of social exclusion and ADHD because of the types of behaviors that ADHD might, a child might have in a classroom. Uh, so for neurodivergent teens, rejection doesn't just hurt more, it lands deeper, it lasts longer, and shapes how safe they feel being themselves. What's important here is that this isn't about neurodivergent teens being too sensitive or lacking resilience. Their brains are doing exactly what they're designed to do, scanning for safety and belonging. When a young person has experienced repeated misunderstanding, exclusion, or being the odd one out, the brain learns to stay on high alert, so small moments can feel very big. Understanding that this helps us respond with compassion rather than correction, and it reminds us that strong reactions are signals, not character flaws. Okay, so ND differences that shape social experiences. So the neurodivergent brain will process social information differently. I mean, there's so many kind of secret rules to social interactions which are not explained, just in terms of, I mean, there's like any social kind of situation has lots of different things going on, and it's really difficult to learn what is the appropriate way to respond in a social situation. It's difficult being a teenager and being self-conscious and finding those things difficult anyway. But if you're a neurodivergent teenager, it's even harder. Then you're kind of also dealing in school with sensory sensitivity, overwhelm, emotional intensity, regulation challenges. You might be masking. This is a term commonly used. So it's hiding your feelings and your mood, imitating facial expressions, trying not to go nonverbal, bottling up anxiety, thoughts, and stims. trying to focus on conversations but zoning out, trying to act normal. This can lead to autistic burnout. So I'm talking this here about autistic burnout, but masking can apply, I suppose, in neurodivergence generally and sensory hangover. This is why parents often describe when their kids come home from school, you might have a lot more kind of, meltdowns, completely normal. Uh, because imagine putting on a mask all day and having to, I mean, I'm just thinking even of secondary school. My first daughter has gone into, she's in second year now, but just all of the dynamics of going into first year, the different teachers, the different places to be, the the way first years can get treated sometimes by the older kids now that she's a second year, like she's all the second year, but it's just all of those dynamics, trying to find your group. Imagine all of that and then masking your what's going on for you, do you know? Um, really difficult, really, really difficult. So I guess we know this already, hypersensitivity and the senses, being sensitive to light, overwhelmed by internal sensations, motion sickness, dizziness, prefer sitting down very still, standing is hard, like things like tight clothing, brushing hair can be painful, difficulty with wet or tactile stuff. Um, my daughter loves giving me the ick by talking to me about things that are squishy and anyway, but taste, texture causes discomfort, and you might have safe foods. That seems to be a real issue. Food kind of sensitivities that have come up, I suppose, in the last few years. Sensitive to smells, perfumes are overpowering. Sensitive to background noise, multiple sounds, loud noises, that kind of thing. So differences in self-regulation can make it harder to learn from social experiences, impacting relationships and self-esteem. So if your brain and your experience is so focused on regulating yourself, on masking your symptoms, on just like, oh my God, like even just like where my daughter goes to primary school, it's great that during COVID they stopped gathering all the kids in this massive hall. I can only imagine the neurodivergent kids being in a massive hall with that many kids every morning, the loudness, the bumping, the all of that. So that a situation like that can be torturous. And even something as small as like a little sound in the background, um, the escalator sound in Duns in Briar Hill drives me mad. Just stuff like that is just it can be really difficult. Like if your whole experience is is taken up by that, you're not really thinking as much about you're not developing your relationships as much, your social skills, and your self-esteem could suffer. Negative feedback from others can become a guide for self-judgment, so it's like that person doesn't like me, or that person, I feel excluded by them, therefore I'm not good enough. There's a double disadvantage. You've got neurodivergent differences plus increased risk of misunderstanding, rejection, and exclusion. Perceived negative messages about differences can become internalized as your identity. They are literally, their identity is literally being shaped at the moment. So behavior differences can lead to peer exclusion, can lead to sadness, shame, and isolation. And I'm sure none of this is a surprise to you. So rejection sensitivity is a really important thing to talk about. Exclusion lights up the same regions of the brain as physical pain. So does grief, by the way. So social interactions are often processed literally and personally, So you could, if you miss a context or tone, it can lead to assuming harm was intended. I've worked with a lot of teenagers and adults where something that doesn't seem like, objectively speaking, like I worked in a situation, say, where this lady was talking to this person that she really wanted to speak to, and then she was interrupted by something that happened to occur in that situation. It was, and she t and but then she got back to talking to the person she wanted to talk to, like maybe 5 or 10 minutes later. But that interruption by the other person literally for her, it was really difficult for me to work with her on kind of talking about the intent versus the impact. So the impact on her of that interruption was that she felt she wasn't good enough and that, this other someone else is more important than her, and it's okay for her to be interrupted because she's neurodivergent or because she's less good or whatever it is. But the intent of the interruption of the other person was not harmful. So, so sometimes something that is not intended as harmful can feel like it's harmful to the person who's neurodivergent. So, and then if you kind of put that to the other side, I also worked on another creative project a few years ago where there was there there was a person working on the project that had very kind of direct communication, kind of like just says what's on their mind. And I mean, God, I can say the same for myself most half the time. But just kind of like just will say what's on, a neurodivergent person more likely to say exactly what's on their mind, to say it without the niceties of social things we learn in social kind of etiquette, but that could unintentionally offend other people. So the neurodivergent person is not intending to offend other people, but it could unintentionally happen. And past rejection primes the nervous system to expect threat, and exclusion can be internalized, leading to withdrawal and self-doubt. So real versus perceived exclusion, both of them hurt. Whether it's real exclude, whether somebody intends to exclude you, or whether it's you perceive it as exclusion. So rejection sensitivity is described as extreme emotional sensitivity and pain triggered by the perception of rejection. Even it's important to note that the rejection does not have to be real. Even the perception of rejection triggers a real pain response and protective reactions. So RSD is common in neurodivergence. Being different means being frequently rejected, or perceiving rejection are frequently rejected as well because you might behave in a different way, or acute memory of past rejection, difficulty in reading tone, tired of being underestimated, intense sensory and emotional reactions, PTSD, trauma, those kinds of reactions where your brain remembers rejection from before. It needs to do that in tribes. Like we need to know when we're part of a group or not part of a group. It's kind of the essence of being a human being, is being part of a group or not part of a group. And so it's understandable. And then you have this thing called the double empathy problem, where you might have and I know I'm talking about autism in particular here, but this can apply. An autistic person might struggle to communicate with neurotypical people, have successful social interactions with other neurodivergent people, feel pressure to mask or pass as neurotypical. One of those questions came in tonight about people who don't want to identify as neurodivergent, or I've heard of cases where somebody says, I'm okay being ADHD, but not autistic. So feels socially isolated in neurotypical settings. But then the neurotypical person might frequently misinterpret the communication of a neurodivergent person, have successful social interactions with other neurotypical people, assume that autistic or neurodivergent people lack social skills, benefit from a society that rewards neurotypical social skills. So, in other words, social interactions are bi-directional. Understanding another neurotype's social interactions is not just the responsibility of the neurodivergent person. Okay. So I think that's really important for us to note that in terms of talking about this stuff in schools. I know professionals maybe are starting to speak the neuroaffirmative language, and but like not many of us get access to professionals. Do you know what I mean? Like there's so many people on a waiting list. I was saying this to the others earlier. Since I've been working in the HSC since the 90s, neurodivergent people have, unless you've got a mental health issue, then you don't belong to CAMS. Well, maybe ADHD to an extent, but like if you're ADHD, but the mental health issue has to be there if you're autistic. Um, and then, primary care. I mean, I worked in primary care in Galway. Like, we could be talking about a 4 year or more waiting list. There's not many supports out there. And I think it's amazing what private groups of parents have done together to support one another, but it's not near enough there. And I think psychoeducation needs to be there in schools. It's great that I'm working with the Lust for Life. It's a charity in Ireland, and we've developed a school program for primary schools, which is free, but now we're developing it for first year in secondary school. And I will definitely, we're talking about communication, listening skills, that kind of thing, but this is definitely something that will form the basis of one of the future years of modules that we're going to be developing. Inclusion, burnout, and withdrawal. You belong here only if you cope like everyone else. So social isolation is often protective. Some parents were asking the question of, should I, is it okay for my child not to be, to be isolating themselves? It's not a lack of a desire to belong. Just because somebody is isolating themselves doesn't mean they don't want to belong. It's just trying to belong is really very difficult. Inclusion without adaptation can increase shame, anxiety, and self-esteem issues. Withdrawal and retreat is often a nervous system response to cumulative stress, not failure. True inclusion means adapting environments to support regulation, dignity, and authenticity. So this is a nice little visual. Plants can thrive in the wrong environment. A water lily would shrivel up and die if you tried to grow it in a desert with no water. It needs the right environment to grow and be happy. Okay. So in other words, different people also like different things in order to thrive. Some people are morning people, loves planes, hates beans, very good at problem solving. You have people that are very creative, loves animals, another who's very active, likes to be around other people. So when you look at neurodiversity generally, which is the overarching kind of term, yes, we are seeing commonalities amongst neurodivergent brains, if you like, however, like every person is completely individual themselves. Um, we all need different things to thrive, and it's important for us for the environment to adapt to us as well, and for us to really, and I'm talking about work environments as well, not just I suppose education environments, but then where do teenagers go? They eventually end up in a work environment that also needs to be inclusive. Um, so school avoidance, this is one of the questions by a parent. What's happening? The school becomes linked with threat. There's might be sensory, social, emotional load might build up. Masking will lead to exhaustion in the school day. They might be fear of getting it wrong grows. The nervous system moves into protection mode. So how to understand it as a parent? To understand it as them expressing distress, not defiance. Sometimes it can be seen as and yes, of course, there are kids sometimes that chance their luck. Um, and oh, my daughter does this, I'm tired or I'm this or like I'm kind of glad she goes to school across the city because literally I kind of say to her, unless you're like 9 or 10 in terms of about to die, then I'm not collecting you because I can't go across the city. But it's really like to understand like if there's a pattern emerging with your child, your neurodivergent child, that they're really expressing distress and starting to like avoid school, rather than see it as this child is being defiant and not doing what they're told, they are expressing emotional distress to you. Avoidance is communication. It's not laziness. Regulation must come before reintegration. So it's really important that they feel regulated and safe enough before they're reintegrated into the environment. Of course, when I wrote a book on anxiety a few years ago, it's not all about, and like a lot of neurodivergent teens will also have anxiety. So it's not all about like just like when your child starts to show signs of not wanting to go to school, of course you're going to keep trying to encourage them to go. And you might be using things like reinforcement, like, well done for going to school today. You really found it difficult going in. And there's things that you can do and there's like sensory strategies you can use, particularly for the younger age group, but also older in terms of like fidgets, talking to the school about them being able to like use a kind of a sensory room on site, being able to have movement breaks. These are things that psychologists often recommend. Um, Even if your child hasn't been diagnosed, I feel like because a lot of people are waiting for diagnosis or they don't have the finances to actually be able to get the proper diagnosis as such, if they go privately or else they're waiting on a long waiting list. I think, I think like there should be flexibility around these things for kids who are, and teenagers who are identifying that way, and their parents do. So we are like, so we're kind of trying to find the balance between encouraging them to go, but then also knowing that if they're really, really expressing distress, that pushing can increase their anxiety and their shutdown. So they need safety, flexibility, and collaboration with the school. So rather than how do I get them in, what makes school feel so unsafe right now? So if this is an emerging theme, this is not, just something at the very beginning of, but this is an emerging theme. It's a really important thing. And like, I do, like, I worked with a family where this became more and more of an issue in primary school, and then they went to secondary school, and then there was difficulties in attending secondary school. And in fairness, secondary school were brilliant, but sometimes, and then there's options like, getting home tuition or else going somewhere like, like another, talking to your educational welfare officer for sure, particularly if they've missed enough days of school. And sometimes they won't be, if those missed days have gone over 2 school years, they mightn't have reached the threshold for the educational welfare officer to contact you. Please contact them for support. They mightn't like me saying it, but you need the support. And it's important to be supported in a situation like that. So if your child is returning to school after exclusion, then, it's small steps, emotional safety before attendance targets, sensory social load considered, clear safety plans, regulation before reintegration again. And then it's about preparing them emotionally, not just practically, using calming, collaborative language, practice coping for difficult moments, plan recovery time after school, review and adjust together. It could be a shorter school day that they return to initially. Um, and there's accommodations that can be made, but I think collaboration with the school is really important, and so that you don't feel alone, I guess, in all of that. And I don't know if I'm answering the questions, but I'm kind of, as I said, doing an kind of dipping into them. Phones also came up as an issue, which can be both a lifeline and a landmine. We know this for teenagers generally. What's happening? Phones offer connection and regulation. We know that. My daughter loves nothing more, and both my kids come home from school, get on a tablet or a phone, or watch TV or whatever it is, and it can really regulate them, right? It regulates us too, right? Would be, we do it too, as adults. It can, however, amplify exclusion and comparison. Like I don't personally believe, like I've been asked so many times, does the phone make a child, more anxious or depressed or have body image issues, that kind of thing? I suppose my view on it is yes, it can, right? On the, like kind of having, like, kind of endless amounts of phone use. But I also think there needs to be a vulnerability there. And it can be a vulnerability relating to self-esteem. Neurodivergence is a vulnerability. So I think, if your brain is, remember we talked about your brain being primed for rejection because you've been rejected from, you have felt rejected for so many times in your life, or you have felt different. Even feeling different on its own can prime your brain to, kind of, when you get on the phone, to be comparing yourself more to others, to be feeling rejected by, like the stuff that's shared. I actually cannot get over. And what I would say to parents is, and I know Snapchat has stories that disappear, but the stuff on those stories is, I've seen, my daughter has shown me stories of like people she knows showing them blocking someone else, and that's their story, and the other person is actually named on the story, like I'm about to block this person because they've annoyed me, and this is a story. Like, what is going on? How can people be so cruel? Sorry, I'm saying that really passionately, but it's like it's horrific. Um, so, like, those kinds of things can really, really like affect teenagers and neurodivergent teenagers in particular. I don't know. I just kind of think like, where is kindness gone? And I'm not saying all teenagers are unkind, but where is the acceptability? How is that acceptable? And I just think even the fact that these stories disappear is like, I know kids like that and teenagers, but I also think that these social media platforms need to take responsibility for stuff like that occurs, because it's not necessarily like, we're not necessarily talking about like, but like I had a slide the last time about bullying versus exclusion. Bullying is like an intentional, repeated action with the intention of harming someone else. Exclusion can have a huge impact. Repeated incidents of exclusion can also have a huge impact. But small little things like that on social media, well, they're not small. They're actually really big. And I would really, really encourage you to talk to your kids about what's on their stories. What are other people sharing? Um, I mean, I was this close to wanting to contact the parent whose child was doing that, but there was actually a couple of children in, and of course, my daughter was like, "You can't, Mom, you can't do that. You can't." And I was just like, "But that is just unacceptable, cruel behavior." Online silence often can be taken very literally. Also, looking at photographs, I'll always say this to my kids. If you're having a party, if you're going into town with a friend, you don't have to post everything you do. And you also don't have to, like, I'm not saying like you can't. I just think we need to be really sensitive to how other people might feel. That I always felt that, even about like, people handing out birthday invitations in a classroom in front of other people. It's just not okay. And I don't even think it's okay in primary school, to be honest. And I don't know. That's what WhatsApp is there for. So rejection stays visible and replaying, particularly on social media. So just be mindful of that when your child is in their bedroom on social media and they're looking at this stuff. There is a catch 22 between needing and hating phones, which is actually also there for your teenager. They might feel like they really need their phone to keep in social contact, but sometimes we as parents, we have to limit their phone use and go, no, like I can see that when you use your phone, your mood seems to be low afterwards. You seem agitated, you seem this, you seem that, or I've noticed today that you're like a bit overwhelmed. You can have an hour of your phone, but then I want you to leave it there. Do not leave the phone in the bedroom with with your teenager at night. I'm telling you, it is like, leave the phone where they can't get it. They should not be going to sleep with their phone in their hands. If they say to you, but Mom, I want to listen to my Spotify, find a different way for them to listen to their Spotify. They should not have access to social media when they're trying to get to sleep and when you've gone to sleep. That's, I'm just saying that outright. And I know that's really difficult to do if you haven't done that up to now, but it's a way of this is your chance to protect your child before they go out into the world. Um, how parents can help validate, acknowledge how painful online moments feel. Talk to your child, even say to them, I felt like I've actually left WhatsApp groups when I felt socially rejected. I'm embarrassed to say that, but I will use that as an example to my child and say, yeah, I was feeling really rejected when they were organizing that holiday and they didn't include me. Or when I went on Facebook and I could see three of my friends that I used to hang around with more and they're celebrating the 50th birthday and I'm not there and they're showing it all over social media, which is fine. It's their prerogative to do that, but it hurts. So I suppose avoid reactive ban, stay calm and curious, name double role of phones. They're helpful and harmful. Collaborate on protective boundaries. I'm not saying, look, if you're kind of going, oh God, she said like they can't have the phone in bed and yet that's their regulation tool and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to implement this stuff overnight. But what I'm saying is, when they're in their bedrooms, you have less knowledge of what's going on their phones. And so really what I would say is begin to develop a conversation with them about the kinds of stuff that they're looking at on their phones. They mightn't want to show you, I understand that, but you can start by being maybe a bit vulnerable yourself and talking about your own experiences. Because some of you neurodivergent teens might have neurodivergent parents out there too. Build off-screen anchors of safety and identity. Sometimes it takes just saying, we're just going to leave our phones down. And that means you too, as a parent, we need to be digital mentors. We're going to put our phones down and we're going to have one meal. If you're not eating together already, and in fairness, we don't, our house is really quite small. So let's at least have one meal together per week or twice a week, or let's have a cup of tea and sit down together and leave the phones. Let's just even building in small touch points in your week can be really, really helpful, hugely helpful. For initially, you might be like, oh God, I don't know what to talk about. This is awkward. And sometimes talking to your teenager, by the way, side, not looking at their face on a walk, just kind of go, I need you to come for a walk. I would love you to come for a 5 minute walk with me. Or will you do that? Or will you do that? You know what I mean? They need to be encouraged out of their bedrooms. They mightn't want to, but they need to be. Um, Psychoeducation, and I just need to be conscious of time. Understanding how my ND brain works. These are two books. Again, you'll get the slides. Two books that I really like. This Being Autistic one by Neve Garvey that came out last year, and then you've got the ADHD Teen Survive Guide. There's plenty of books out there. I always think like psychoeducation basically means understanding yourself. So help teens to understand themselves, not blame themselves. It reduce even kind of going if they have a diagnosis, going look, what are the different things that are in are there for you that present for you. It reduces shame by explaining this is how your brain works. This is how my brain works. Normalize difference. I'm not broken or alone. Just because you feel rejection more deeply, or you're sensorily overwhelmed, or you stim, or you have special interests, or you find it difficult to organize yourself, or to kind of control your impulses, does not mean you're broken. Okay. It builds language to explain needs, ask for support, supports self-advocacy and informed choices, protects self-esteem. So these are the kinds of things where you're talking about common neurodivergent behaviors. There's so much online. The effects of masking, for instance. Key messages. Your brain works differently. That's okay. Struggles are not character flaws. Needing support is not failure. You don't have to mask to belong. Belonging comes from being understood, not changed. Your strengths and challenges can exist together. We are all perfectly messy human beings, and that's okay. We can talk. I know people kind of go, I hate talking about the superpowers of neurodivergent minds because they feel like they're being spoken down to. And I would agree. I think that was the reaction to, oh, we're so neuroaffirmative. Let's talk about strengths. There are strengths, however, and this might be something that you might want to talk about. I know I certainly have hyper focus. If I need to get a job done, I swear to God, I can get it done really fast in a hyper focus type of way. And that's a strength because, okay, the rest of the time I'm trying to avoid things as much as I can, but it is a strength. So even just knowing what your strengths are can be really helpful. Logical, analytical. Usually, every child, teenager, adult has something that they're good at. So encourage that. Another thing is, and I actually have an emotional regulation handout that I'm going to adapt because it's not written in very neuroaffirmative language because it's about 10, 15 years old that I got from the HSE, but I'm going to amend it. But it has these degrees of emotion and it explains it. So it's basically, and I know you might think this is more for a younger child, but it's kind of like, I do scaling questions with clients all the time. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how bad is it? How good are you feeling? How not good are you feeling? So this can really help visual, especially if you're a visual person, to kind of go, right, when I'm in the green zone, I feel happy, calm, focused. You can kind of say, sometimes it can help, are you in the yellow zone? Are you in the orange zone? Yesterday, when you came home from school, you seem to be more in the red zone. Talk to your child about stuff like that together. Emotional regulation strategies. When their storm meets our calm, this is one of my favorite quotes, co-regulation occurs. And it's true. And it's really hard, though, as a parent to co-regulate. The four S's of attachment. This is actually a slide from my last presentation. So the quality of your relationship with your child provides them with a psychological immune system for threats. So it's all about them feeling safe, seen, secure, and soothed. When you smile at me, I learn that I am lovable and likable because it's sometimes they mightn't have an issue with feeling lovable in their families, but being likable by their friends can be really hard. So how parents can help generally validate, acknowledge the hurt before exploring what happened in a situation. Stay curious with your child. Ask yourself what else might be going on for them. Name rejection sensitivity. Talk about it. After tonight, talk to your child about what that means. Separate feelings from facts gently and together once can, but really it's important to always regulation comes first. Make social tools explicit. You know, you might use social stories, teach practical tools, do role plays with them about social situations, focus on repair, not perfection. Um, and I guess these are going to be in the handouts that I hand to you that you will get. Movement supports. They used to be called feeling fixers, but I don't like feeling fixers because I don't think feelings need to be fixed. I think feelings need to just be go through a tunnel. An emotion is a feeling going through a tunnel. If we block it, it's going to go underground and going to affect us in negative ways. So how do we help the feeling kind of go through us? So we have movement supports, things like, you know, if your child is having regulation issues, you know, releasing built up energy, rocking, pacing, jumping, you know, stuff. And that's why having breaks in school can be really helpful. But also, it can be helpful in a classroom or in a work environment if you're allowed. Like I just did an understanding and managing ADHD course with ADHD Ireland. And they gave us loads of movement breaks, and we were allowed to stand up as we were learning the stuff. And that really helped. Sometimes it can just help to switch off your camera if you're online and be allowed to do stuff like that. So that's best for anger, restlessness, overwhelm. Calming supports this is best for anxiety, sensory overload. So like deep pressure, weighted blankets can be really useful, or you can get a weighted teddy bear in Smith's. A tight hug is really can be nice if welcomed, sometimes not welcome. Slow breathing, quiet spaces, low lighting, getting under a little blanket, turning off all the lights can be really, really helpful. Headphones. Um, I just worked on the panto actually, and one of the kids was I couldn't believe like a child so young with headphones kind of saying, "I am autistic, you know, and I need these headphones to help." And I was just like, "Wow." Um, I wish every child could have that comfort with that from such an early age. And be like, you know, this is me. These are my headphones. I have loads of different color headphones. And this is, you know, and I just thought that was wonderful. Um, Warm shower, bath, wrap blanket, sensory regulation, move it or lose it. The Whole Brain Child by Dan Siegel. Sometimes we just need to move it or we're going to lose it. I have these anchoring strategies, which I'll also send to you from my book, Love In, Love Out, which can really help when you need to help to regulate when your child needs to regulate. And regulation has to come before thinking about like, you know, the thought processes. And then connection support, so that, you know, so it's best when they're feeling lonely, rejected, or ashamed, sitting beside you in silence. Sometimes just sitting beside them in silence, putting a hand on them, or just there, watching a little show together, petting an animal. I find animals, my God, I have a cat. I sleep with my cat every night, and it's wonderful. Not everybody's into cats though, that's fair enough, or dogs or whatever. Sending a text or emoji to a safe person, shared activity, anything shared. Gaming, if they're into gaming, just do the gaming with them. They might be like, oh my God, you're so crap at this, mom or dad. But like, if that's their interest, then try it. Thinking supports. This is only after regulation. Naming the feeling. This feels like rejection. You've spoken about rejection sensitivity. This feels like rejection. What does rejection do to you, darling? It makes me feel really alone. And, you know, like talk about it. Separating facts from interpretations. But this you can't do when they're really in a distressed state. This is only when they've come out of that. writing or drawing the worry, gentle reframes, coping statements. Role playing, I talked about that. You can do stuff like that. This was a slide that people really liked the last time. Whose opinions matter? My circles of influence. Mapping out whose opinions truly matter builds perspective, self-worth, and resilience. So that random person on social media who called you a name or who was mean, do they really matter? Like, do they? And not everybody's going to like us, by the way, and we don't like everyone, right? You don't like everyone. They don't, not everyone's going to like you. So it's kind of looking at your child going, this is me, right? Who are the people really important to you? Who's the next level? Who's the next level? And who's the next level? And that's really helpful because the people in this sphere doesn't really matter, you know? And I know you're not going to do this when they're really highly distressed. This is a thinking exercise as opposed to, so fostering belonging. Teens often need multiple safe adults who understand their differences to feel truly seen and supported. A wider neuroaffirming network protects mental health and supports regulation. Be an ally, respect their need for recovery and space after social effort. Celebrate kind, attuned mentors, adults who get your teen, adults and other teenagers. Model being a villager, respect difference, challenge exclusion, include. Encourage shared activities. Parents asked me about like, should I keep encouraging them, that kind of thing. I suppose you're trying to fit into their interests, their sensory needs, their energies, creative projects, volunteering, animals, small groups. Sometimes they might be involved with those groups, but not make connections. You're not trying to force the connections, even having like one thing just because they mightn't show you that they're connected with another person the way a neurotypical person might, or you might have a neurotypical child, doesn't mean that they're not enjoying the activity or doesn't mean that they haven't connected. They might be connecting in their own way. So I guess that's just something to consider. And then from blame to partnership, some parents feel blamed. So fear of judgment can lead families to withdraw from supports. Blame shifts focus away from adapting environments. Partnership, not blame, supports belonging and connection. That's really important. And this stress can be felt by children, obviously. So building your compassionate voice, really important. I'm all about compassion. If a situation is very difficult, what actually happened? What meaning did I take from it? So that person didn't look at me in the hallway. What meaning did you take from it? Well, that they were ignoring me and that I'm not good enough. Could there be an alternative meaning? What would your kinder voice say? What would you say to somebody if they said that to you, your friend? If a friend interpreted it that way, what would you say to them? Again, you are only doing this once they're regulated, because if you try to do this when they're dysregulated, they're going to feel completely invalidated. So validation needs to come first. Taming your inner bully. I do a lot of this work with children and teenagers. This is a great book for it. Self-kindness, Wizzo voice to the rescue. It's kind of looking at the inner critical voice that we might have and how we might speak to ourselves in a kinder way. And a poison parrot activity can be really good, which I'll also send you. And then developing a mantra. I got this. I'm safe. I am strong. That kind of thing can be really helpful. Like share your mantra. Like, my mantra is go get him, Malie. Go get him. You've got this. You know what I mean? It's my way of encouraging myself. And then I talked about good enough parenting, self-compassion, and just finally, when our children feel left out or rejected, it's tempting to jump in and fix it. But what they need most in that moment isn't our solution, it's our steadiness. And that's when our calm becomes their courage. So even though you might feel emotionally dysregulated when your child comes to you and says, Johnny was ignoring me today in school. And of course, you're going to believe your child. And that's totally understandable. And you're going to want to go into that school and say, how dare that child? Or you're going to want to contact the parent. But it's really important, just like with my daughter there, where she was showing me her somebody blocking someone else. You have to respect your teenager and what they want, because if you go in with guns blazing into a situation, contacting other parents, giving out to the school, doing this, that, and the other, you know that your child's going to feel even more excluded potentially. So you really, really need to be steady and try to be. And sometimes the only way we can do that is when we have people that we can rely on ourselves. And if this is really difficult for you, I would encourage you to get some support from friends, from family. It's really hard, particularly if we've had difficult experiences growing up ourselves. I have struggled. That's why my book is called Love In, Love Out. Sometimes just even taking a breath when your child has said, this horrible thing happened to me in school today, is enough to bring you back into your thinking brain and to help you to co-regulate with them. And that's the most important message I can give. And just very finally, if you want to contact me, I will be sending you those resources that I've promised. If you want to contact me at this email address, Malie at drmaliecoyne.ie, if you have any kind of further queries or anything like that, please feel free to. And thank you so much for listening. And I hope that you found that helpful.
Thanks. There was so much information in that, and all so relevant. So thank you for sharing that. And I think it's great that, we can come along to these things and get information, but it's really important that we come away with the tools to help us to manage these situations. Thank you, everybody. We've just got a few minutes left. My name is Maria Powers. I'm the Drug and Alcohol Family Support Worker with the Western Region Drug and Alcohol Task Force. And I suppose the reason that I feel that this is a really important topic that we talk about, we would work with parents of people who are using substances who might mention that their son or daughter or parent or sibling, they already might have a diagnosis um, that would fall under the neurodivergent spectrum or umbrella. And it can be a theme, but it can also be, I suppose, a something that a parent might come to us that their young person has that diagnosis and they might feel that they are vulnerable, I suppose, in getting into substance use or getting into being, I suppose, used because of their vulnerability, when it comes to masking and really searching for that sense of belonging. And to be accepted within peer groups, they might feel pressured into participating in different activities that they might not necessarily want to. So it is something that we would see within our service and parents wanting support for. So there are a number of organizations, if anyone wants to take a screen grab of this. Um, I suppose particularly when it comes to neurodivergence, there is the As I Am charity, which is Ireland's charity for autism, and they provide evidence-based advice, resources, and a guidance that the community can trust. There's also the Centre for Autism. It's based in Northern Ireland. It's called Middletown, and they support the promotion of excellence through Northern Ireland and Ireland in the education of autistic children and young people. And they've got training and lots of different resources there if anyone wants to have a look out for those. Number four also is a service, a youth service, but they are actually providing a workshop, a 4-week workshop that is starting in February. So I've got the details of that in an upcoming slide. Um, but there are other organisations listed there if anyone wants to check those out. This is an amazing resource that Malie had forwarded me a few weeks ago. So thanks, Malie. And it's put together by the Autism Neurodiversity or and More Athenry support group. So it's put together by parents of people who have children who are neurodivergent. And as you can see, there are lots of different chapters there with information on different sections, um, which is so valuable, and it can be sent out. And again, if you want to take a screen grab of this one, just a number of the resources that are available that you might be able to tap into to have extra supports on top of the information this evening. So I think that's it from my end. I'm conscious of the time, so I rushed through that. But if anyone does want any more information, to contact us, and
Uh,
we'd be happy.
Apologies if it was a very quick whistle stop tour, but just to kind of know that you are not alone with this. I know it's like it is really difficult. Um, but I hope that you can get some support for yourself, if anything, and for your and so that yeah, and I really, yeah, I kind of wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Night, everyone.
Night.
Everyone.
Thanks, everyone.